Hello and welcome to LFC Focus. So the dust has now finally settled on the signing of Shaqiri for Liverpool, and I think it's time we actually take a look at the player that Liverpool are getting and ask the all-important question that I think has been on a lot of people's minds of whether or not he is actually good enough to play for Jurgen Klopp's Liverpool side. Now, later on in this video, there's going to be plenty of stuff. We're going to have a stats breakdown comparing Shaqiri to all the other kind of players that he is similar to, including Sadio Mane of Liverpool last season. I'm going to be talking to a Stoke fan as well who's watched a lot more of Shaqiri than any of us have really. And then finally going through the comments from you guys as well to see what you lot think and generally responding and kind of initiating a conversation, let's say, about Xherdan Shaqiri. But starting off, simply going through all the pros and cons of this player. I think for starters, Liverpool are getting a player with obvious talent here. You know, it's clear for all to see when you watch, even if you're just watching goal compilations or assist compilations or anything like that, it's clear that this player has a lot of raw ability and a lot of technical skill when playing football. It's the kind of thing that got him dubbed the Alpine Messi earlier on in his career. It's the kind of thing that made Pep Guardiola want to actually block a potential move to Liverpool 4 years ago while Guardiola was Bayern manager and Shaqiri was still playing for Bayern. It's clear that, there are big managers out there who rate this player and can see that raw quality there. And I think if there's any manager out there who's going to harness that, it's Jurgen Klopp. And I think that whole thing about Guardiola, for me, is really positive because that is where he played his best football at Bayern. And for me, that suggests that he is the kind of player who thrives under good management, who needs someone to actually work him hard to get the best out of him. And when you think about the fact that, yeah, he did drop off during his spell at Stoke City, then he was being managed by Mark Hughes and much later on Paul Lambert. And these aren't the kind of managers who you expect will always get the best out of players. They might get the best out of some, but not, the huge talents or certain players of certain types, like I think Xherdan Shaqiri. So hopefully, Jurgen Klopp can do what Pep Guardiola did 4 years ago in getting probably what is the absolute best out of Xherdan Shaqiri. And I think it's also good that he has been on the books for a while. I mentioned this when he first signed for us. The fact that Jurgen Klopp has had eyes on him for a while as well, because I think that's something that a lot of people were worried about as well. They were worried that this was just kind of a knee-jerk transfer because obviously his availability came about very suddenly because of Stoke's relegation. It was a transfer that wouldn't have been too difficult to negotiate because it kind of suits all parties. And with that £13 million release clause, it's pretty low risk. And I think a lot of people just looked at that and thought maybe Liverpool had jumped the gun a little bit and thought, well, why not sign him just for the sake of it? But I think, like I said, the fact that he's been on the books, the fact that the club have scouted him in the past, they've wanted him for a while, and a lot of the members of the current transfer committee were on the committee back when we first scouted and tried to sign Xherdan Shaqiri, to me suggests that this is a player who, while we may have concerns about his playing style, and I will come on to that later, he has been on the books of the club and they've clearly seen something in him that just maybe we haven't. And I think also one of the main positives is the fact that he offers something a little bit different. While I think he will still be able to fit into Liverpool's style, he offers a few things that our current front three, as good as they are, as fantastic as they are in terms of the raw quality and their skill on the ball, they don't actually bring to the squad at the moment. I mean, for starters, you got the set-piece threat. Now, if we bring Nabil Fekir in as well, that's another free kick and corner taker there, so it kind of negates that positive side of Shaqiri a little bit. But right now, with him now being a Liverpool player, he's probably the best free kick taker in the squad, the best corner taker in the squad as well, and he takes a reasonably mean penalty, and we were kind of struggling at times last season to pick out who was actually going to be on spot kick duty on a regular basis. So I think those are all really important things to bring to the side. Obviously, set pieces, they're not going to change a whole season. They're not going to get you like maybe 15 goals or anything like that, but they can change certain games. You can imagine just maybe a Champions League knockout game where we have a late free kick, we need a goal, and then we're looking to Shaqiri on the bench and thinking, he's talented and you never know, he might just do it and he could score a goal that ends up defining Liverpool's season. That's the important thing about having a set piece taker in your side. He's also got the ability to shoot from range, which I don't want him to be doing it out of frustration too much next season, because we have seen in the past when teams park the bus against Liverpool, we tend to have a few pot shots. It's normally the centre-backs doing it. But I think it's important having just that extra string to your bow. So if things are getting crowded out in the box and the ball comes out 20 or 25 yards from goal, we've got someone who is a threat in that regard. And it also means that he will draw people out the box as well, because players will want to close Xherdan Shaqiri down the same way they wanted to close Phil Coutinho down as well, because they don't want to allow him too many opportunities opportunities to shoot from distance because they know that he has got that in his locker. And like I said, with the free kicks and everything, it's not something that'll happen often. He'll probably score maximum 5 wonder goals this season, should he even get, pretty regular football for Liverpool. But it all depends on the scenario. If he does it at Old Trafford, amazing, he's a cult hero. If he does it at Wigan in the League Cup, then it's nice, but no one really cares. It's just something that it's nice to know that it is something that is possible and is still in the locker. And also, he's got a lot of physical strength as well. I don't think it's escaped anyone that Shaqiri is a big lad in terms of width, maybe not in terms of height. He is pretty stocky. You can see why they called him the Power Cube at Bayern, which, by the way, is a fantastic nickname, and I hope we start using it at Liverpool as well. If you ask me, it should be on the back of his shirt as well. But he's got that strength, and that's something that, for all Mane and Salah and Firmino's qualities, and I think they are a lot stronger than people give them credit for, obviously with their speed and the way they move the ball around, people kind of have them marked down as more technical players, but Shaqiri is on another kind of level in terms of the lad's just a bit of a barrel, and I think if we are trying to counter-press, get in the opposition's face, it's probably quite good to have someone who can go physically toe-to-toe with opposition defenders, so I think that is really good as well. One of the most important things about Shaqiri as well, I think, is that he's just really good backup, and this is something that I will come on to later with the comments section as well at the end of the video, but it's obviously dependent on Fekir as well, and if we don't sign another number 10 or backup attacker between now and the end of the window, the idea of Shaqiri being, the first choice backup off of Mane, Salah and Firmino is a little bit worrying. I don't want him being someone who makes that many regular appearances, because really we want someone who can rotate with that front three very, very often and doesn't really cause a drop off in quality, whereas Shaqiri remains to be seen. You never know, he could be fantastic, but right now he's not as good as any of those front three players. But he's still good as backup, and like I said, if we've got a Fekir there as well, just having Shaqiri on standby if you ever need him, compared to what we had last season, where, no disrespect to these players, but calling on like Solanke and Ings, not only were they being played in roles that didn't really suit them, they just weren't really of the quality we need in certain situations. So I think it's really useful to have that, and like I said, it's just an improvement on what we already have. And finally, again, if you are just worried about this, I've mentioned it already, 13 million quid. Not that much money, is it? It's pretty cheap. And I've said before that I think for that kind of money and for the kind of player that we're getting, also in terms of the fact that I think because he's at Liverpool, because it's this huge jump from Stoke, he'll probably be content to be on the bench for a while. It's very difficult to find players who will be okay. No one's going to be over the moon, but are happy-ish with that kind of situation. And so for 13 million and for the quality we're getting, I think it's an absolute bargain. Now, obviously, there are downsides to the signing of Xherdan Shaqiri, and there are detractors out there who aren't happy to see him at Liverpool, and it's worth going over the reasons why, because I think there is certainly credibility to the argument. Now, one of the main criticisms people have is that he's not really known for playing in a style that fits into the Jurgen Klopp system. And this is something that will be mentioned later on in the video as well. People see him as that kind of stocky player. There are also questions about his attitude as well. I think while he has got a decent sprint speed and he can counter-attack, he's certainly not on the level of Mane and Salah. And you wonder just purely whether he'd be able to catch up with them during the Liverpool counter-attack or anything like that. So I think there are still worries there. But the fact of the matter is, players can change, and with an incredible coach like Jurgen Klopp, when he first came into Liverpool, he took on a side that wasn't built to gegenpress, and he got them doing at least a rudimentary version of it very quickly. And since then, he's brought in players like Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, who played in a much more passing-based Arsenal system, and turned him into an absolute pressing machine. So it's not something that'll happen instantly. It won't happen overnight. And even with the fact that he is getting a little bit of a pre-season, he is joining up for the US tour. So there's a couple of weeks in there, hopefully of pretty intense training before the Premier League season actually starts. I think it will take a while before we see Shaqiri actually get up to speed with the Jurgen Klopp system, and that means that we probably won't see too much of him early on. He certainly won't challenge those main front three players. I mean, give it a couple of years or maybe even just 6 months or a year, and he might actually be pushing them for a spot in the starting 11. You just never know. But for now, I think it will take time for Shaqiri to get up to speed with Jurgen Klopp's methods. And then the other problem that a lot of people have is that he is, at the end of the day, a mercurial talent. Like I said at the very, very top of the video, he's got bags of talent. He's clearly a very, very talented individual, But the problem that a lot of people point out is that we just don't see it enough. And those incredible goals that he scores, that you see on Match of the Day, that you see on YouTube highlights reels and stuff like that, for every one of those, there are a lot of missed shots. That is something that you cannot ignore. So I think that could be a problem, and one of the main issues is the fact that if we are calling on him from the bench, if we're looking to rely on him and we're looking for him to do the kind of jobs that we wanted Ings and Solanke to do last season that they just could not fulfill, then it's going to be a problem if he comes on and he just starts blamming shots wide and doesn't really function within the team and essentially just has a bad day. We need someone who we can bring on and trust that they are going to change the game in a positive way. So that is a worry, but the thing with Shaqiri is at his current age, I think he's 26 or something like that. So he's now coming into the prime years of his career, and that's normally when players start to build up a real level of consistency. You know, when they're younger, they can have good performances and bad performances. They're not even quite sure themselves how to harness their own talent. So hopefully now as Shaqiri gets older, he gets a real idea, and I hope that Jurgen Klopp and the coaching staff drill this into him as well, of what he can actually achieve and how to achieve it on a regular basis, because if he is to succeed at Liverpool, then that is something that he is just going to have to do. So now it's time for a stats breakdown, and the 4 players that I have technically used for this is Shaqiri in the 13-14 season, back when he had his last full season at Bayern Munich, because if you ask me, that's more the player that Liverpool will be getting than the one that did play for Stoke, because the one that played for Stoke played 36 games in the Premier League season last year and was an integral part of that Stoke side, whereas in his last year at Bayern, he played 17 games. He played something close to 800 minutes, which roughly works out in those games he played as 46 minutes. So when you think about that, that's maybe like a handful of starts, certainly not hitting double figures, and then probably a lot of substitute appearances where he's come on for the last half hour or even just 20 minutes or anything like that. So I think the role that he will play at Liverpool, certainly this season, is closer to the one that he played at Bayern. I'm then, of course, going to be going over Shaqiri last season in the 2017-18 season for Stoke City in the Premier League. Then looking at Fekir as well, because obviously that's the sort of the premium attacker that Liverpool is supposed to be bringing in. That's the one that everyone's excited about this summer and the one that everyone imagines will be further ahead than Shaqiri in the pecking order. And then I tried to think of who last season played the most like we're expecting Shaqiri to play next season, and I thought it's probably Sadio Mane. You know, Mo Salah obviously plays on the same side as Xherdan Shaqiri, but I think Sadio Mane, the way, especially in the second half of the season, that he did drop deep a little bit, he looked to create from just outside the box. He was sort of trying to play in his teammates a little bit more than just going for goal, but was still cutting inside and trying to get goals that way. I think the role that Mane played last season is most likely what we are initially going to ask from Xherdan Shaqiri. So the first stat, goals per 90 minutes. Shaqiri from Bayern Munich actually does really, really well here and almost gets the top spot. Obviously, it is Fekir who takes it, which is obviously very, very exciting. Sadio Mane got 20 goals for Liverpool last season, and I think we can all say that while he had his rocky patches, he came out having had a very good season, and especially towards the back end of it, he was finding the net regularly, he was doing really well, and he was contributing to Liverpool's attack fantastically. So the fact that Shaqiri, when he was at Bayern, vastly outperformed that, and even with the Mane comparison, you can't even make the point that obviously at Bayern he's got fantastic talent around him. They're going to be creating space. They're going to be putting fantastic balls on a plate for him and things like that. Mane will have had that at Liverpool as well, because Liverpool last season were an absolutely fantastic team. So that is obviously hugely promising. You have got the downside that the stat at Stoke, 0.24 goals per 90, isn't fantastic. But I've said before that I think the role that he played at Stoke and the one he played at Bayern and will hopefully play at Liverpool are very, very different things. And the only thing you can really draw from Stoke is the fact that that was his go in the Premier League. And you know, I think it is sometimes overplayed, this Premier League difference with other European leagues, but it's always important to consider because there are extra things about physicality. I don't think you get as much time on the ball, and there's also a lot more competition. But I think it is natural that you're almost definitely going to score fewer goals at Stoke than you are at Bayern Munich, and you probably will do at Liverpool. So don't get too worried about it, but it is food for thought. And then assists per 90, they're all really, really close on this. I was impressed by the fact that Mane got 0.3, so he edges out all of them. It's a pretty good stat from Fekir as well, 0.25, and then Shaqiri, 0.23 at Bayern, 0.21 at Stoke. Like I said, they're all very, very similar. I mean, I'd quite like to see Shaqiri get a lot of assists at Liverpool. I think he'll be helped out by the fact that he's got that incredible talent in front of him. You know, it's much easier to lay it on a plate for Mane or for Salah or Firmino or even the midfielders like Keita or Wijnaldum or Oxlade-Chamberlain or anything like that than it is at Stoke when the players in front of you are like Juve and Crouch. You know, no disrespect to them, but they are not the world-class talents that Liverpool have got available. So hopefully those assist numbers will go up. I mean, when you look at key passes, which is essentially rules out the whole problem with assists, that it is essentially reliant on the player actually scoring after the pass. You know, it's not all down to the quality of the player who actually makes the assist. Key passes is all down to the quality of the player making them, and Shaqiri does very, very well here. I mean, considering Mane got 1.6, you'd think that's a decent score. 1.6 key passes for per match. That basically means you're pretty well involved. And then you look at the ones that Shaqiri is getting, not just at Bayern with 2.65, but I think 2.06 at Stoke is very, very impressive, especially when he has this reputation for not necessarily being a team player, being a little bit greedy, having a bad attitude and stuff like that. That to me suggests that the lad is actually working very, very hard. So that one is food for thought as well. Tackles one, this is part of my idea that, you know, a Klopp forward, when you're looking at the kind of players he wants, it isn't just about the goals and the assists and the key passes. It is all about the tackles and the interceptions. And that's not just because Jurgen Klopp likes hard workers or anything like that. It is essentially because that is crucial to the attacking system. You know, the amount of goals that Liverpool scored last season, which came from them winning the ball back in high up areas, from Salah, from Mane and Firmino, hounding out defenders, winning the ball in dangerous areas and catching opponents before they could even recover. It's important that attackers at Liverpool are able to read the game intelligently and also don't shy away from a tackle. Now, when it comes to tackles, Shaqiri does look a little bit disappointing, especially at Stoke. I'd hope that, you know, he gets a little bit more. I don't know whether it's an attitude thing or whether it's a skill thing or whether he just doesn't want to get himself sent off. He might not back himself to actually put in too many tackles. You know, with his short frame, he's hardly one to go in for slide tackles, because more often than not, he's probably not going to reach the ball and he's going to end up conceding free kicks and stuff like that. So it's a little bit disappointing. Obviously, I was actually very surprised by Fekir performing very well in this, because he doesn't actually play in the Liverpool team last season. I think if there is one worry about Fekir, it is the same one with Shaqiri as well, that we haven't seen him play in a Klopp system. You know, Lyon don't really play football similar to ours, so people are worried about whether he might be a little bit like Coutinho, where it was a little bit, as good as he was, square peg in a round hole. So that's hugely promising from Fekir, not so much from Shaqiri. But at Bayern, you know, he does a similar score to Sadio Mane, so not too worrying there. And then interceptions, for me, is actually a really promising sign here, because it does show that for all his reputation as someone who's based on talent and skill and on just raw ability sometimes to just hit the ball really hard from really far out into the goal, the fact that he's making all these interceptions, especially in a Stoke side where you imagine he might not actually be backed up as much because they do like to sit deep. It's not like Liverpool where the forwards are getting in your face as a defender or anything like that. The fact that he's posting these really good numbers to me suggests that he actually reads the game much better than a lot of people give him credit for. And if he can translate those numbers to Liverpool, when you're looking at Mane getting 0.34 per 90 and Shaqiri last season getting 0.49 per 90, that actually suggests that Shaqiri could become really useful to Liverpool's counter-pressing system. And finally, I've basically put together a thing that I call a Klopp score. It takes into account all 5 of these stats and it pretty much puts each player up against each other in terms of calculating the score for how well they do in all 5 evenly balanced groups. Now, if you want to know the exact maths of it, I'll run it across the screen now. If you don't worry. But it essentially says how good a player would be in a Jurgen Klopp system. Now, this one is very, very interesting because Shaqiri at Bayern outperforms every player here. And obviously the caveat is at Stoke, not that great. It's a pretty poor score. It's not too far off Sadio Mane, so maybe with a little bit of coaching and stuff like that, he could get himself up to speed. You know, Mane wasn't a Klopp player either when he arrived. He had to be trained into those kind of systems, whether he was a natural at it or not. So the fact that Shaqiri, while he has got that disappointing score at Stoke, that really, really good score at Bayern that suggests that he is an all-round fantastic player for the Jurgen Klopp system, not only explains why Jurgen Klopp and the Liverpool talent team wanted him for so long and really liked the look of him at Bayern, but just fills you with hope that he could actually be a really useful player for our system. And as a side note, Fekir performs pretty well as well. So another reason to get excited about Nabil Fekir as well. But I think that stat breakdown is very interesting. And I think it almost busts a few myths that we have heard about Xherdan Shaqiri. So next up, it's time to see what a Stoke City fan thinks of Xherdan Shaqiri. So yeah, here I am with George, a Stoke fan.
Yep.
a pretty miserable Stoke fan after
I
the last
don't know.
season.
I think we're coming back strong.
Stoke are doing all right, yeah, but we are here, of course, to talk about Liverpool's brand new number 23 and your old number 22, Xherdan Shaqiri. I think it's been interesting in that there's been a contrast in terms of how Stoke fans have responded to it. There have been some who said, we are losing a player who on his day was incredibly talented and was capable of pretty impressive things in a Stoke shirt when you look back at some of the goals he scored in particular. And there are other people I think are a little bit more different. They've sort of looked at it and thought, we always knew he was going, and was at the end of the day pretty inconsistent in a Stoke shirt. How do you feel about the departure of Xherdan Shaqiri?
Well, I would probably put myself in the latter side of what you just mentioned there. Ultimately, he came with really high expectations, sort of another massive signing in what was, looking back, a really great era for Stoke. And then in the first 2 seasons, he was really quite poor. He might do really well in, say, games against Man City, and you'd think he's really starting to get going. And then you just basically wouldn't see him. And in those first 2 seasons, he only scored 7 goals, and 5 of those goals came against teams that were eventually relegated.
Yeah.
Which is pretty poor. And then there are a lot of also off the pitch things that meant that a lot of Stoke fans sort of didn't really like him much by the end.
Yeah, he wasn't like a cult figure. He wasn't loved.
No, he wasn't a Ricardo.
When you look at like Mohamed Salah at Liverpool, and you look at that kind of relationship that's formed between player and fans when a player does well, that never really existed with Shaqiri.
No,
Stoke.
it always sort of threatened to start, and you'd think, exactly, this is what we want from this player, and then he never really kicked on.
Well, that's what I mean, because he was very inconsistent. It's interesting, you mentioned that his first 2 seasons, he did have 3 seasons at Stoke in the end. He was very inconsistent, and he didn't actually post very impressive numbers at all in front of goal. I think in his first season he only scores, 2 goals?
3 goals.
3 goals, 2 of which are in the same game against Everton.
And one of them was an accident.
One of them was possibly an accident. He won't tell you it's an accident, but I think it's fair to say it was.
I think it was.
But yeah, and when I've obviously talked about the stats already in this video, and you look, he's actually posted okay numbers last season for Stoke. He was your top scorer as well, but I wanted to ask, do you think that because obviously Stoke tended to sell a good forward talent every summer when Shaqiri arrived, after his first season you then moved on Bojan, after another season you then move on Arnautovic, and it's after that he actually gets his biggest numbers in terms of goals and I think assists as well. But how much do you think that loss of talent affected Xherdan Shaqiri at Stoke?
Well, it was a bit odd really, because like you said, in those first 2 seasons we had a better forward line, but at the same time he was shunted onto the right, which made him very predictable. He'd always cut inside, and actually he wasn't as good then as he was when those players went, and he almost became the focal point of the side. We built the side around Shaqiri, and although he played a lot better, the rest of the team actually got worse.
Yeah.
So it was a bit of an odd one really. He did better when all the good players were gone, but as a whole, we were a lot worse.
So it is something that Liverpool fans have been concerned about. There's been a kind of an underlying concern about, I think, Shaqiri's attitude. Some people think that he's not a hard worker. Would you say that suggests that even though when the team was built around him, people did struggle, do you think that suggests that maybe he isn't quite a team player, that he's more an individual star? And also, would you say that because he gets his best numbers when he is the focal point, do you think he actually performs better when the pressure's on him, like it was last season where he was basically meant to be saving Stoke? Or do you think he's better, say, like when he was at Bayern Munich, which we've obviously talked about already in this interview, where he was getting pretty good numbers, but he was much more on the periphery of the side?
Well, I think with Shaqiri, a big part of it is where he plays. When he plays on the right, I think, like I say, he's far too predictable. But when he's in the centre of the park, just behind a striker, I think he's much better. So I'd say that's the telling factor of what Shaqiri you're going to get. Obviously at Bayern it was a lot easier for him because he was surrounded by much better players. At Stoke a lot of the time he was doing it all on his own.
Yeah.
So it's hard to say how he'll do at Liverpool. I'd say a big part is where he plays on the pitch.
Because that's something I'm interested about as well. Obviously when you play for a Jurgen Klopp side you do need to be quite versatile, and it's not always just about position. Sometimes it is more about the sort of role that you play in the overall mechanics of the side, and I have seen people suggest that maybe Shaqiri could even play in a midfield 3 in the kind of role that Oxlade-Chamberlain has occupied, and we're expecting a player like Fekir could come to occupy as well.
I think that would suit him a lot better.
Do you? Yeah.
Yeah.
Because obviously, like I said, there's been questions about his work rate, but we have seen that his tackle stats and his interceptions are actually reasonably impressive. So do you think as a sort of charging forward box-to-box midfielder, Shaqiri would be better than Liverpool rather than playing the Mo Salah role?
Well, maybe not box-to-box.
You were asking a little bit too much.
I think we're asking...
In front of one particular box,
Yeah, I think he's much better in that role where there are a lot more options open to him. because otherwise he can be a bit of a one-trick pony and very predictable for a defender to read when he's just shunted onto the right.
Yeah. It is a hell of a trick, though, that long-range shot.
Yes, yeah, it does come in handy, but again, from a Liverpool perspective, he might not be playing as much, so obviously if he's playing less, then that's going to give him less of an opportunity to get those screamer goals that he scores.
I think a lot of it does come down to, there could be like one or two moments this season that could just define Shaqiri's career. Like you could get, if he scores one of them goals at Old Trafford, for example, he becomes a cult hero in Liverpool forever. If he's only doing it in the League Cup, then no one's really going to care at the end of the day. Lucas, for example, scored a screamer in the League Cup and he never really got renowned as someone who was good at scoring goals. I think it's fair to say as Liverpool fans. But yeah, finally, I just wanted to ask you, because I've mentioned already in this video, Shaqiri grew up as like a street footballer. He wasn't really playing for academies or anything at a young age. So for him, football is a lot about enjoying it rather than maybe playing it as a job or just trying to get the best out of his own natural talent. So do you think that will help him at Liverpool more? Because obviously Stoke, it was a struggle last season. He probably wasn't having as much fun. And also just give us an idea of how you think Shaqiri will perform now he's made the move to Liverpool, bearing in mind that this is also probably his last chance at a big club as well.
Yeah, so on the first point, I didn't really know actually that much about his backstory then. I know more about it now. And maybe that did affect him slightly. He strikes me as quite an instinctive player.
Yeah.
So perhaps a lot of like drills or things like that were kind of wasted on a bit. I don't know. On the second point about Liverpool, I really don't think he's going to suit you guys very well. Sorry.
I did think you might come in and bring the atmosphere down.
Yeah.
I know how you do feel about Xherdan Shaqiri.
Well, so Liverpool, it's all about the high press.
Yeah.
Shaqiri's not really that into that.
Do you think it could get drilled into him? Yeah.
I think he's needs to refocus how he trains.
Yeah.
He focuses, I think, too much on almost this sort of bodybuilder style physique.
We've seen the calves,
Klopp needs
terrifying.
Klopp needs to kind of rein him in on that.
Yeah, and I think we have seen that with Klopp before as well. He's said to players who sort of build themselves up a little bit too much. I think he said it to Joe Gomez last season, get out of the gym and just start, playing more football. And hopefully, like we've said, the fact that this is maybe his last chance at a big club should hopefully get the best out of Shaqiri.
And also, I think Liverpool fans are going to become quite frustrated with Shaqiri because you're all about the sort of quick pass forward, not like long balls, but getting it up to the front three.
Is he a bit of a dawdler?
He is a bit of a dawdler. You remember how you used to get annoyed with James Milner cutting inside?
That's very
true. You're going to get that so much more with Shaqiri. And he is going to, if you need him to come on and score that goal that can get you that 3 points, I'm not really sure if he's the man to do it. But who knows?
You never know with Liverpool. Jurgen Klopp, he knows how to pick a player. I think he knows how to get the best out of a player as well. So I think if any manager under the sun is going to make things work for Xherdan Shaqiri, Klopp is probably a manager. He's up there with maybe a Guardiola who he has played under before.
And like you said, this is his big opportunity.
This is his big opportunity as well. Would you like to see him succeed? Would you be happy for Shaqiri, or has he got on your nerves too much?
I don't know. I feel he was a bit big-headed, definitely, at the latter stage of his time at Stoke. And I think if you're getting relegated, you're a championship-class player.
That's true, at the end of the day.
If he was as good as he thought he was, he should be keeping us up. Players like Sigurdsson, Tevez, they kept poor teams up in the past. He didn't.
Oh, well. Maybe he's just not that kind of player.
Maybe
Try not to let it get you down too much. But yeah, thank you very much for coming on, George, and giving us your thoughts on Liverpool's brand new player, Xherdan Shaqiri. And coming up next, we'll be replying to you guys' comments on this brand new signing. So yeah, that wasn't really what we wanted to hear as Liverpool fans. We'd much rather a glowing report card from Stoke. But I think, as I said there, the thing you've got to hope is that the form that he showed at Stoke City does not translate to Liverpool. And the raw talent that we've seen and that form that I mentioned earlier on the video that he showed for Bayern Munich, that's what we get out of him. And I'm confident about that. I think Jurgen Klopp can do that. I think Shaqiri could end up being a really useful player for Liverpool. And finally, looking at a few of the comments from you guys, these have come off of the video when the signing was actually announced. First of all, XD Chris HD. Now, he's an Arsenal fan here, so don't go after him. But yeah, that's why he says you're rather than us when talking about Liverpool. He says signing Shaq for less than £20 million on your budget is a no-brainer, which is exactly what Jurgen Klopp said about the transfer as well. And improve your strength in depth, which was clearly lacking last season as you dropped off in the league and had no major subs to bring on in the final. Now, this is something that I find very promising about Shaqiri as well, is because when I look back at that Champions League final and the fact that we had to bring on Adam Lallana, who knows if we could have won if we'd been able to bring on Xherdan Shaqiri. Now, obviously, he's nowhere near as good as Mohamed Salah yet. He might be eventually. You just never know with football. But it's more about the system and the fact that we can bring someone on who wouldn't knock off the performances of Firmino and Mane, because the problem in the final was when we brought on Adam Lallana, we basically changed the system and we pretty much switched to a 4-4-2, something that Liverpool had done nowhere near enough last season to be able to actually be proficient enough in a tactical system to employ it in a European Cup final. Now, if we brought on Shaqiri, Firmino and Mane could just carry on doing the same things. The midfield three could do the same things. The fullbacks could do the same things as well. And we would have basically functioned as a much better unit. And like I said, who's to say that with Shaqiri, we wouldn't be European champions right now. And that would be absolutely fantastic. So I think it is a useful signing in that regard that we've got someone, because at the end of the day, while we have got fantastic wingers, I think in terms of players similar to them within the squad, we are lacking in that, and hopefully Xherdan Shaqiri can give us that. Now, Eugene Oluwienyi says that he's a bargain at that price, but when you look at City and see they have a backup, Mahrez, I presume he's talking about, that has won the PFA Player of the Year, you get worried because there's a clear difference in the quality of the depth. Now, this is something that's important to think about. Obviously, Liverpool do not have the riches that Man City have. We've got more money than I think a lot of people give us credit for. We also don't like spending money in that regard. And I think Jurgen Klopp, he said before that he doesn't want to ruin a player's career just for the sake of having them for a couple of years at his football club. So I think he will have looked at Riyad Mahrez and thought, the lad actually deserves a bit more first-team football, given what he's achieved in the past, and certainly in the English game. Like it said here, he won the PFA Player of the Year award. So I don't think he really liked the idea of having Mahrez sat on the bench as well. And I think with Shaqiri, you know, when you look at the situation last season when Liverpool and Man City both went out and bought left-backs, the thing everyone was saying was that we bought Robertson for £8 million and City bought Benjamin Mendy for £50 million, and that represents a clear gulf in quality. And obviously, Mendy did very well in the Champions League the season before, whereas Robertson got relegated with Hull. So there's almost an argument there, but I think when you think about what happened, obviously Benjamin Mendy did get injured, so we never really saw that much of him. But the fact that Robertson emerged and ended up being the best left-back in England by the end of the season, to me suggests that it's not always something worth worrying about. Like I said, it's a valid point, but it is not necessarily the be-all and end-all, and it does not necessarily mean that Mahrez will actually have a better season than Xherdan Shaqiri. So next up, Usama Saidani says, I don't really want him to be a rotational player. He's good enough to be a first-team choice. Now, I don't know whether Usama Saidani is actually Xherdan Shaqiri in disguise, because it is something that I've thought about, and the fact that Shaqiri, he obviously won't be coming to Liverpool and thinking, yeah, I'll be a squad player. He's not expecting to be on the bench all season. He is expecting to play his way into this Liverpool side. Now, that's the important thing about this, is that people actually would be happy to see him in the first team. You know, not everyone thinks he's good enough, but there are at least a reasonable amount of people who actually wouldn't mind seeing Xherdan Shaqiri and would actually like to see him playing in the Liverpool first team. And I mean, you can't, as good as Solanke, I think, as much potential as he's got, and as good as Ings has been in the past, you just can't say that for those two. So I think it is good that Liverpool have got a player here who is actually exciting, and that fans, some fans at least, will want to actually see in a Liverpool shirt. And then John Cronin says, funny thing is, Shaqiri is a superior footballer to Fekir, in my opinion, and yet a lot of fans rave far more about Shaqiri. Now, I can see where he's coming from here, in that I think there is the simple argument that because we haven't seen as much of Fekir, we have essentially only seen the good bits as well. When you watch a footballer for 90 minutes, it isn't just like watching an extended YouTube compilation. You do get the bad bits as well as the good, and obviously none of us have seen any Fekir muck-up compilations or anything like that. We have only seen the good side, whereas with Shaqiri, with him having played in England, with him having played against Liverpool multiple times, we've seen both the good and the bad sides of the player. So I can see where he's coming from here. I still think Fekir is a better player. Obviously, in that statistical breakdown, we've seen that in part Shaqiri has actually outperformed Fekir, especially when he was back at Bayern Munich. So who's to say Shaqiri could end up being better than Fekir? But I certainly think that the manager will rate Fekir more than Shaqiri. And for starters, for the first few months or so at least, Fekir will probably be ahead of Shaqiri, and we'll gradually start to find out, because it is also, a lot of it is about how well they actually adapt to life in Liverpool. And then finally, the Raptor_XX sums it up quite nicely, I think, by saying, for the price, we've gotten ourselves somewhere in the region of a 30 to 40 million pound player. And I think in today's market, that's probably a fair assessment. When you think about the fact that Stoke bought Shaqiri 3 years ago when the market was completely different, you know, there'd been no Pogba, no Neymar, we'd only just had Gareth Bale back then. I think when they bought him for 12 million quid, that is around about 30 to 40 million in today's prices. So I can agree with him there. If he's with us, then I'm with him, as long as he gets on board with our way. And obviously that's the most important thing, is that Shaqiri does conform to the Jurgen Klopp style of playing football, that he throws himself into this and he adapts himself to suit the way that Liverpool play. And I think obviously that's a big concern of everyone's. And I think the fact that this is, as has been mentioned already in this video, his last chance at a big club. You know, if he doesn't succeed at Liverpool now, he is probably going to be playing for Stoke-style teams for the rest of his career. He's got every reason to want to throw himself into it, to try his absolute best, because this is essentially his dream move as well. We've seen how happy Shaqiri is to be at Liverpool, and I think if that's not going to motivate him to not only just adapt to Liverpool's system, but also bring himself up to Liverpool's quality, then nothing will at the end of the day. So there you go. I think all in all, at the end of the day, time will tell. We'll never know right now whether or not Shaqiri will be good enough, and it is all about what he does on the pitch. But for all we've discussed today, for all his raw talent, and for the fee that we got, the way we managed to acquire the player, I think it is more than worth a go to see whether or not Xherdan Shaqiri can actually turn out to be a belter player for Liverpool. So that is all for today's video. Thank you guys very, very much for watching. If you have watched all the way to the end, it has been a very, very long video. If you did enjoy it, why not give it a like? If you're new around as well, hit that subscribe button there. Check out some of the other videos that have been out on the channel over the past few days as well. Don't forget to follow at LSC Focus TV on Twitter, and I'll be back soon, hopefully, with some transfer news. Bye for now.